Hello and welcome to the final Sophie Ridge on Sunday of the season before Parliament breaks for the summer next week. And I have to say, since coming back from maternity leave, it has been an absolute rollercoaster. Exactly 2 weeks ago, Therese Coffey was in this studio defending the Prime Minister about what he knew when about allegations over the behaviour of the former Deputy Chief Whip, Chris Pincher. Well, since then, Boris Johnson has announced his resignation and we're now in a full-blown leadership race. Well, we can introduce, on that note, our first guest. Dominic Raab has endorsed Rishi Sunak to be the next Prime Minister. He's backing his former cabinet colleague, who is currently the frontrunner in the campaign. Rishi Sunak says inflation needs to be brought down before taxes can be cut. He's also accused his rivals of spreading fairy tales about the economy. Dominic Raab, Deputy Prime Minister, joins us now. Thank you very much for being with us. Before we get on to the race, I'm just keen to talk about the heatwave quickly.
Yeah,
it's something that so many of our viewers can be thinking about, whether you've got kids at school, whether you're commuting into work. How concerned should we be and what preparations are in place?
Well, I think being prepared is the best resilience, if you like. I know that the NHS are doing a whole load of contingency planning. That's actually their stock in trade. They're well prepared for that. Kit Malthouse at the Cabinet Office is making sure the other preparations are in place. Obviously, there's some common sense practical advice that we're talking about. Stay hydrated, stay out of the sun at the hottest times, sun cream and those sorts of things. But we ought to enjoy the sunshine and actually we ought to be resilient enough through some of the pressures it will place.
Would it be smart for some people to work from home?
Look, that's for employers to consider and for people to decide. I'm not going to start dictating things like that. But obviously, we've got more flexible working. It's one of the things after the pandemic lots of businesses are doing. So that will also help with this kind of thing.
And how about parents as well who might be concerned about their kids going into school? Do you think it would be fair enough for them to keep them at home for a couple of days?
No, I think, look, we're coming to the end of the school term anyway, but I think making sure young children get the education they need is really important, particularly after the pandemic, and the schools are well placed to deal with that.
OK, right, let's talk about the leadership race, shall we? And also, more widely, the political situation over the last few weeks has been extraordinary. Obviously, Rishi Sunak is your preferred candidate, but just to rewind a bit, you know, when other ministers were resigning or telling Boris Johnson that he needed to go, it was reported that you were loyal to the PM to the end. Is that accurate?
Yes, I mean, look, I give my counsel as Deputy Prime Minister and as a Cabinet member privately, but I did want to avoid a leadership contest and I did want to support the Prime Minister. But he lost the support of the Parliamentary Party, and once that happens, I think you look forward and we try and actually the one thing about our system is it will resolve this relatively swiftly by first week of September, and you've got to look forward, and that's politics.
You say it's relatively swiftly by the 5th of September. Some would say that actually it's still quite a long time that Boris Johnson is still in post. Yeah. Did you have any conversations about potentially taking over as the caretaker PM, as you're obviously Deputy PM?
No, it was much discussed. Of course, if it had been ultimately necessary, I would have been willing to do it. But I think it's the right thing, and it's also what we've done in the past when a Prime Minister has had to step down to allow them to continue until the new leader is in place. So
it wasn't seriously considered at any point then?
I think it would have depended on effectively what MPs as a whole would have wanted. But I think once the PM made clear he would step down, I think the push for an immediate resignation and walking away from number 10, I think that went away.
How did you find Boris Johnson in those weeks?
Well, do you know what? One of the things about him is I think he's very magnanimous. He clearly was disappointed, but got on with the process of making sure the government is still stable, looking at what more we can do in the weeks ahead to make sure that we consolidate the achievement and keep the delivery going, whether it's on the cost of living, particularly, which people are concerned about. So I think he was focused on doing the job. I mean, clearly a very difficult time for him.
I'm quite interested because you obviously, you know, you say that you were like loyal to the Prime Minister to the end, but you've decided to back Rishi Sunak in the contest, who many people in your party believe was really the driving force forcing him from office when he resigned. Why?
Well, I just don't accept that account. But the reason I'm supporting Rishi Sunak, and I said one thing about leadership contest, it forces you to look at the future, is that he is, I think, far and away the best placed with the experience and the calibre to see us through the cost of living challenge. I think he's the one with a credible economic plan to get inflation down. If we can't do that, we're not going to leave people with the money in their pockets from tax cuts or anything else. So controlling inflation, but then driving forward. And he set out some further ideas about boosting through deregulation, smarter regulation, the pharmaceutical sector, the tech sector, the financial sector, financial services sector today. I also think he's got the right values, which is, I think, what you're touching on. I mean, I've known Rishi since he first became a Member of Parliament. The values that he grew up with of hard work, family, entrepreneurialism. I know the story, I've heard it privately, let alone in the course of these leadership debates and hustings, about how when his mum was running the pharmacy, he would help her do the books. He understands, if you like, that pocketbook economics, which I think is so important at the time of the cost of living. And thirdly, and let's remember what this is ultimately about in 2 years, the general election, and the polling shows he's far and away the strongest candidate to beat Keir Starmer.
We'll definitely dissect some of those things later, but just on the sort of Boris Johnson loyalty question, you know, others who did stand by Boris Johnson have ended up rowing in behind Liz Truss.
Yeah.
Nadine Dorries, for example, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who said that Rishi Sunak showed disloyalty. According to the papers, Boris Johnson wants anybody but Rishi Sunak to be Prime Minister. Did you talk to the Prime Minister about your decision to back him?
So, of course, there's a courtesy. I wanted to make sure the PM knew before. I've talked to him since. I've not heard any of those kind of things from him. But, of course, there'll be a circle of advisors and people who want to back Liz who'll make these points. I'm going to adhere meticulously to Reagan's 11th commandment and not speak ill of my fellow Conservatives. And actually...
You might be the only person in this contest, then.
Well, I mentioned it during the referendum of trying to play the ball, not the man or the woman, and I'm going to do it again. But, look, I think people want a positive prospectus, and I think Rishi, on those three critical things, economic plan, values and, frankly, electability, ability to reach out, not just within the Conservative Party, but to the country.
Okay.
Whether it's blue wall or red wall seats, he's the guy that can win. At the end of the day, I think that's a pretty important factor in all of this.
Well, let's talk about the economic policy, shall we? You know, Rishi Sunak always says that he is someone who believes in low taxes. But if we just look at his record, I think we should be able to show some of that on the screen now, because he raised taxes. This is the UK tax changes for different chancellors, you can see along the bottom there. Everything above the line is raising taxes overall. Below the line is the tax changes that would lessen the burden. You can see there that Rishi Sunak raised taxes the same amount in 2 years as Gordon Brown did in 10. He says he believes in low taxes, but we've got to look at his record. It points to a bit of a different story.
Well, I think the elephant in the room is, of course, the pandemic, and we had the biggest economic contraction in 300 years, and then all the pressures of getting the NHS back on track. I don't think none of those other chancellors had to deal with that. And very interestingly, all of the other Conservative chancellors who have commented have said that actually he's the one with a credible economic plan. But we want to get taxes down.
I absolutely accept the pandemic is something that came along and you have to respond to, but there are choices there too. You can raise taxes, you can also cut spending and go back to austerity, which Rishi Sunak said he didn't want to do, or you can look at borrowing. So there are political choices here too.
Well, you can't borrow your way out of an inflation crisis. And if people are suggesting that we should have made cuts to the NHS at a time not just of COVID, but with all of the other non-COVID NHS challenges, they've got to spell out where they're coming from. What Rishi has done is say, look, we need to get inflation under control. He has cut national insurance, the biggest tax cut in a decade for payrolls, £330 for a typical worker. But what he's not going to do, and it's important to explain why, is cut taxes when actually you'll be taking... We want to all leave people with more money in their pocket. But if you cut taxes and then inflation robs people of that money because it's worthless, or sees interest rates go up so their mortgages are more expensive, then frankly it's a false economy. And I think Rishi is the one that is credibly stating, until we control inflation, he's the only one saying this, we're not going to be able to deliver those other things. And he's also the one that is talking about the long-term plan to strengthen investment by taking a different approach regulatory-wise. He's talked about this today. Tech, pharmaceuticals, financial services, areas of great comparative advantage to the UK economy. So from the immediate challenge to the long-term prospectus, I think he's the one with the plan.
Liz Truss says that actually cutting taxes leads to growth. She said in the Telegraph this morning that a continuity economic policy, under who she could be talking about there, has led to low growth for decades.
Look, Liz can answer for her policies and her record. She was Chief Secretary of the Treasury. People can see whether spending and headcount in the civil service went up or down. That's for them to work out. But what I'd just say this is the immediate challenge, what people are worried about right now...
What do you mean about the civil service?
Well, it's not just Rishi that is going to be accountable for what he's done in the face of a massive pandemic, but Liz has done was Chief Secretary of the Treasury. I mean, did she cut taxes at that time? Did spending go up or down during her period as CSD? I think, without criticising her personally, I think it's right that everyone on their record is scrutinised.
So what is the record then?
Well, you can go and look it up, but I want to focus on what Rishi is saying and what and what his team backing him have been attracted to. It is the idea that sensible, conservative economics means you get inflation down. If not, any money that is delivered to people in their bank accounts through tax cuts will be robbed again through inflation or interest rates and mortgage payments going up. That can't be right. We've got to get inflation down. And of course, he's talked about, come 2024, penny off the basic rate of income tax when it is sustainable.
Other candidates are saying that they believe some of the tax cuts they're promising can be self-funding. Penny Mordaunt, for example, wants to halve VAT on fuel. On paper, that would cost £13 billion. Her team tell the Sunday Times it would actually be self-funding because drivers would end up buying more fuel.
I'd like to see a serious analysis of self-funding tax cuts. Sometimes it can have that effect if you're generating more business activity. That's why, for example, what Rishi did with the super deduction on capital allowances encourages business investment. That can encourage greater revenue. But I don't think those alternative suggestions are particularly credible. And of course, the big question is, what impact would it have on inflation? And until we've got inflation down, any money that is handed out with one hand will be taken back with the other. And I think you can see that when we had the debate on Friday night and Rishi explained that, people understood that, and you can see from all the polling that people feel that he's the one levelling with the country about the challenges we face, but also offering a credible, well-thought-through plan to get through it.
You talk about the polling, and I know that you're referring to polling of the general public, but I just want to talk about polling of party members, because it does feel like, actually, when it comes to party members, he's not the favourite choice. Is he? I think we can have a look at some of the YouGov poll, for example. So this is the kind of most recent, serious, weighted poll of Conservative Party members. They were asked, which of the following candidates do you most want to replace Boris Johnson? This was earlier this week. Penny Mordaunt, way out in front of Rishi Sunak.
Well, I think if you look, and the Con Home had some other polling today, it is quite fluid. But the reason I'm pointing...
Yeah, he doesn't top that one either, though, does he?
Well, actually, it's very close. But, of course, I think the more people hear from Rishi and the more the choice is presented, I think the more compelling it gets. But ultimately, this isn't just... Can I just make this final point? It's not just a question for Conservative MPs or, indeed, Conservative members. It is a question for the country. And I think Conservative members who will make this decision will be focused, particularly when we get to the last round, on who is best placed to win over voters, whether they're Remain or Leave, swing voters, Labour voters or soft Conservative voters in the shires, in the working class blue wall seats as well as the red wall seats. And ultimately, it is very clear, and the jail polling, jail partner polling shows very clearly, Rishi Sunak is the only one that can win.
But it's not general election, is it? This is about... This is about Conservative Party members. And actually, if you look at the YouGov poll, on every one of the head-to-heads, Rishi Sunak effectively loses. Like Steve Baker told me this week, that whoever goes up against Rishi Sunak in the head-to-head will win.
Well, I don't think that's right. And the reason being, first of all, it's very fluid, the members polling. Secondly, the members are ultimately one of the factors of the considerations will be who can actually win in 2 years' time at general election. And there, the gap is clear. Only Rishi can win. The others are 10, 12 points behind. So when you ask the country, and this ought to be an outward-looking contest, or at least perspective, they see that Rishi can win from the north to the south, Leave seats, Remain seats. And that's what ultimately this will be about. And I'm very confident members will focus on that in the last round.
Now, 4 of the 5 candidates who are still in the race have committed to doing the Sky News debate on Tuesday night. The one who hasn't so far is Rishi Sunak. So will he commit to doing it?
I'll let the campaign team give you an answer on that. I don't know what the schedule is. But look, I think he'll be very confident going into all these debates. I think he shone in the Channel 4 debate. I'm sure he will again this evening.
But you accept the importance of these debates because, as you have been saying as well, it's not just about the Conservative Party members, isn't it? People are electing the next Prime Minister.
Oh, look, I don't think Rishi's shying away from that scrutiny. I think he's the standout performer in these debates of the candidates that are likely to win. But look, I don't know what the schedule is, and I'll let him and his team answer that.
Do you think whoever wins should call an election to get their own mandate?
There is a mandate for the Conservative Party. It's important we deliver on that, and we'll have an election in a couple of years' time. I think the country...
So no, basically.
I don't think the people, I think voters, going about their ordinary business, with the cost of living challenges, with the war in Ukraine, with all the other things we're dealing with, I think they want a government in place delivering for them, and that's what I'm sure we'll focus on.
And so you don't see a problem in, say, 160,000 or however many Conservative members choosing the next Prime Minister?
Look, we have this debate every time. It wasn't a problem when Gordon Brown took over. It wasn't a problem when Theresa May took over, and it won't be a problem in September.
OK. Finally, nearly finally, on the leadership question, who do you think is Rishi Sunak's biggest rival?
I don't want to get into talking about the others.
Come on.
Look, they're all good candidates. I said I'd adhere to Reagan's 11th commandment. I think one of the things we've shown, actually, in this contest is the breadth of talent in the Conservative Party. You've got entrepreneurs, you've got people with armed forces experience, and I'm very proud that we've got a slate of candidates diverse in all sorts of different ways, not just background, but also professional and others. Now,
very finally, because I promised myself that when I next interviewed you, I am going to ask you about this, so I am going to. A few weeks ago, you had a very lively Prime Minister's question session with Angela Rayner. And right at the end, you seem to be giving a wink. I think we should be able to show a wink.
I'm going to have to go now. I've got a train to catch. She talks about working people. She talks about working people.
What is going on there? Who were you winking at?
I was winking at Ian Murray, who was by Angie Rayner. By the way, I've got to say, Angie Rayner's great value in all of these. She's so lively. I mean, it's quite a contrast with Keir.
So why were you winking at Ian Murray?
Ian Murray
I find this to just ask more questions.
Well, at PMQs, you have these subplots going on, and he was sort of braying at me by Angie's side, and I was winking at him. But not least because he was talking about, I think there was something that was said about Angela Rayner standing in a leadership contest against Keir, and he said, "What's wrong?" I think I heard him say something like, "What's wrong with that?" Anyway, it's all part of the cut and thrust.
There you go. Thank you very much. Glad that we did clear that up. So there you go. Dominic Raab winking at Ian Murray, not Angela Rayner. Thank you very much for being on the programme today, Dominic Raab.